An extension between the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett seems as good as done. And coming into this offseason, Bill Zito has a ton of leverage.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, June 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at Monoman12. That is Jacob Winans. You can follow him on X at JakeW_8. Shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. You can do that all on FanDuel. So, Panther fans, today on the show, we are going to discuss the reported deal between the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett, which seems as good as done. We are going to discuss more about the Panthers front office on how they have the leverage and how that affects how they pursue bringing back Brad Marchand. We're going to do that in segment number 2, and then Aaron Ekblad in segment number 3, along with discussing who might be on the table for the Panthers to move out in order to fit everyone in come next season. And then also in segment number 3, we might discuss some options in the case that Aaron Ekblad does in fact walk. But Jacob, welcome back to the show. And we are recording this on June 24th, which means it's been a year since the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup the first time around. And it's also a week since they won their second consecutive Stanley Cup. So welcome to the show. And it's a great feeling once again that we are in an offseason discussing Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We're starting our second straight summer of champions, but also crazy to think that a year and 8 days ago, the Panthers were a franchise with 0 Stanley Cups, and right now we're sitting here with 2. So for those of you not watching on YouTube and just listening, I intentionally wore the Conquered the Hunt shirt on here to commemorate last year, and then the championship hat for this year, because it's really special. We don't take it for granted. It was just over a year ago that we were anxiously waiting for a chance at our first Stanley Cup here in South Florida. And I mean, very anxiously waiting, because it did not look great at the time. Now we're in a position with 2 now as the back-to-back Stanley Cup champion. So it's pretty awesome day and grateful to be recording today and getting to talk about it.
Absolutely. And one of my best memories will forever be recording the recap show with you last week on when they clinched their second Stanley Cup. So I also don't take these moments for granted and very thankful. As Sergei Bobrovsky likes to be in the moment, I was so glad of being in that moment with you, my friend, there. And so let's discuss more about some of the reports about what has been coming out recently for the Florida Panthers and their offseason. And Chris Johnston yesterday on TSN 1050 discussed how the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett, the deal between them looks to be as good as done. And then Frank Saravelli today on Sportsnet 590 discussed how the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett it's mostly done, but the AAV is a little hush right now as a part of the Florida Panthers trying to use that as a negotiation tactics for their other free agents that they are trying to keep here. So a few thoughts here, because last week when we heard Sam Bennett say, "I'm not bleeping leaving," when he was at Club 11, which we found out, by the way, that the bill that the Panthers had at Club 11 was $500,000 for what it's worth. But when Sam Bennett said that he's not bleeping leaving, from a personal standpoint for him, I was thinking, oh no, he's going to hurt a lot of his leverage coming into this negotiation for a new contract. But I felt also listening to that then that he's not really about the exact dollar amount for what he's going to get on his contract, especially because of how everything that he went through to being part of the bottom six for Calgary to getting a second chance, and then now the profile of Sam Bennett for the amount of grit that he brings and the fact that he's going to get a raise regardless. I mean, it's a perfect situation for him, and I'm happy for the person that he is going to get the bag, even if it's here in South Florida. Even though I had that initial scare for him, the person.
Yeah, and I think it to an extent speaks to his character because for everything that people like to paint Sam Bennett as a dirty player, a bad guy, I don't know. I guess people consider him one of the. I mean, he's without a doubt one of the least liked players in the NHL outside of Florida. For everything that people paint him as, I think he very easily could have wanted to take this to unrestricted free agency and drive up an absolute craze of a bidding war for his next contract, and he's really choosing not to do that. I mean, you have to respect the fact that he wants to stay here. Obviously, the AAV will wait and see what it is, but I have a lot of respect for the fact that he's showing loyalty, that he's not going on the open market at least what it looks like right now, not going on the open market and having a bidding war for his services, because he definitely could do that. And I think the Panthers are very fortunate, whether he gave up a bunch of leverage with those comments or not. I don't think it was any secret that he wanted to stay here, and it's definitely no secret that the Panthers want to keep him. And I think going into this season, I don't know that the Panthers really saw him as big of a necessary piece as he has become throughout this season and this playoff run. I think the idea was for Anton Lundell to just graduate to that 2C, and Sam Bennett would be not easily replaceable, but somewhat replaceable for the production that he provided. But the way he played this year and then through the playoffs, he absolutely established himself as a bona fide piece of this core that you want to get locked up. And it'll be a good problem to have. The Panthers are gonna be strong down the middle as long as they have Barkov, Bennett, and Lundell in whatever order you decide to run them in. Because ultimately, would not be shocked to see Lundell eventually graduate to 2C and have Bennett drop to 3C, and he would be plenty productive in that role. I'm not worried about at any point having an overpaid 2C or an overpaid 3C or however you want to break that down. I'm going to be glad that we have all three of our centers through the heart of that lineup.
Yeah, we were having that conversation as well about what's going to be happening, possibly what would be happening with Sam Bennett this time last year for once we saw a 6-year deal for Anton Lundell. Remember what we were saying at the time? $5 million AAV looks like a lot in the beginning for Anton Lundell, but it's going to look amazing as that deal goes on. And I mean, it's still a great deal. I mean, that third line, excuse me, was the best in the playoffs. I mean, both of them, all three of those guys plus 15 at least. And to think that that Sam Bennett added it on with the 15 goals for that second line with him, Tkachuk and Evan Rodriguez with Carter Verhaeghe for a bit of time there. But at the same time, I mean, the expectation is still going to be, even when he signs, that he's going to be maybe around like a 50 point player for the Panthers. And then once it comes to the playoffs, we're going to see playoff Sam. I mean, it even happened in Calgary, even before the trade, where he wasn't having the best of regular seasons, but even when the bubble was going on, we saw Sam Bennett perform and be up to the moment as well. So this isn't something new for Sam Bennett neither. So that's why, once again, I think that I didn't know if this was repeatable for more than 2 playoff runs, but this one truly convinced me.
Yeah, it's no longer a surprise. It's expected now, and I think part of his value, it's not even just in the points, it's not even just in the playoff production, it's in the style of play. He has become an absolute culture setting player. the way he plays the game, you can replace 40 points. You can replace 50 points. You can probably find a guy who can get you 25 and 25 and pay him less than what you're about to pay Sam Bennett. And you can probably find a guy who can contribute at a second line pace in the playoffs for less than what you're about to pay Sam Bennett. But what you can't replace easily is the way he plays the game. You can't replace the irritability that he brings to the game, and he's in every single opponent's head. And no matter how much you want to paint the narrative that he's a dirty player, that he crosses the line, sure, he definitely plays on the line. Occasionally he can cross that line and play. I won't call him a dirty player, but he has had a couple of dirty plays, and that's hockey. And at the end of the day, every single team in the league would love to have him, and they hate to play against him. And you really can't replace the style that he plays with. As much as we love Anton Lundell and believe in his potential and the fact that he is already, in my opinion, good enough to be a high-end 2C in the NHL. He's also not the physical presence. He's not the net front guy. He's not the one who's going to fight and stand up for his teammates when the time comes. And Sam Bennett is all of those things. And I think if the Panthers want to continue being the bullies of the NHL and playing this gritty, in-your-face, tough-to-play against style, Sam Bennett's the type of guy you have to have on the team. And I think this year, in the playoffs in particular, showed me that he's less of a luxury and he's more of a necessity for the Panthers to continue the culture that they've established.
Couldn't agree more. And the box score does not show that for what Sam Bennett brings, for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss more of the reports of Brad Marchand and some ideas that Bill Zito might have to do, even if he doesn't necessarily want to do it, because tough decisions will be made if you keep 2 out of the 3 big name free agents that the Panthers will have to make decisions on. We'll discuss more of that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. And guys, you probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. I love that it's completely online. Rugiet connects you with board-certified doctors and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL and use code LockedOnNHL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL. Use promo code LockedOnNHL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information. Segment 2 here on this Wednesday, June 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Armando Velez here with Jacob Winans here on another edition of Winans Wednesday. So the Florida Panthers, some of them have made the trip to the Bahamas, but they made a little bit of a trip during their stay there. They've already visited a Dairy Queen, so the Dairy Queen trips continue even after their postseason run. So quite hysterical once again for the Panthers and continuing it on. But also the preseason schedule has been announced. So kind of the same pattern that we've seen the last few years. Last year it was the doubleheader against Nashville at home, which crazy to think. The doubleheader against Nashville at home, Tomáš Nosek gets hurt, doesn't return until the Global Series, and was still able to be an impactful player from there. And Tomáš Nosek missed a lot of time as well after the trade for Nico Sturm. So also, once again, a great story for Nosek. Hopefully he gets a little bit of a pay bump this offseason for him. But this theme of the show is all about talking about leverage for the offseason for Bill Zito and company. And he's earned that for everything that he's done based on the trades, the amount of times he's fleeced guys, and even going back to the whole Sam Bennett thing. He's seen Reinhardt take less, Gustav Forsling take less. So who is he to be the guy up front and say, give me the most here? So this goes back to the guy who's ultimately responsible for team building, and that's Bill Zito. But now there's another report, Chris Johnston of The Athletic and TSN, saying that Brad Marchand is looking to stay. Rumors were that he would get around 8.5 in the open market. To review where the Panthers stand as far as cap, $19 million to pay 7 players at most, which now that I look back at everything, Jacob, I think they're going to pay 6. And they're going to likely start with 22 players as opposed to 23 like they did last year because they're just going to be so up against it. And this one, again, I think that the Panthers in the position that if they pay 2 out of 3, they're going to make some tough choices. They already extended Jesper Boquist, which I was pounding the table on for it. But now seeing of how they performed in the playoffs, there might be a little bit of a tough position for the Panthers to make that trade to clear up 1.5, which kicks in this season. There's also another contract with Evan Rodriguez, possibly. He has 2 more years left on his deal. The difference if you believe that Jesper Boquist can move, his ability to move up and down the lineup can be at Evan Rodriguez for half the price. You bet on that if you're confident enough, if you're Bill Zito. But then there's another thing of where Bill Zito has the leverage in, and it's RFA Mackie Samoskevich, whether he's used as trade bait or whether he's used as an extension. Mackie cannot be offer sheeted. So that is another leverage play. It's either you take the deal that we have or a trade for Mackie Samoskevich. And 30 goal potential for Mackie that I see from him for how much he's grown this year. So a lot of these leverage plays for whether you keep Marchand and the following guys that I just listed, Etu, as far as trading him, for me, he's off the table completely, 100%, in my opinion. These other 3, I don't think they're off the table.
I agree. I'll start with Boquist. I think where he's concerned, it's a weird position. He gets extended, but then in the playoffs he loses his spot in the everyday lineup, and that's an odd position to be in for a guy who was effective the entire year. Hit a really, really bad goal drought shortly after getting paid, went a long time without a goal, but that's not really what you're paying him for. He's not paid to be the goal scorer. He's more of the energy type guy. But at the end of the day, when you're this close to being up against the cap, at 1.5, that's 2 players. That's 2 league minimum guys. That's what 1.5 million gets you. So if you can trade Boquist and you think you can replace his production for with the signing of 2 minimum players, I wouldn't be shocked to see that happen. And I think there's definitely some trade value there as far as what you could get back for him. You can get a draft pick back. You can get a mid-tier prospect maybe, but I don't think he's a poor asset on the trade market by any means. He showed us something this year for sure. Evan Rodriguez is the most likely guy, I think, who's going to be moved, which is unfortunate, but it's also the nature of the business. I mean, he absolutely more than delivered on what he was paid over the last couple of seasons. He's a guy that many teams around the league would love to have, especially if you can move him to a contender, because his AAV is relatively low for what he provides, and he's shown that he's a big time playoff performer over the past 2 seasons, and his versatility is probably his biggest asset. We didn't talk about it much, but he starts the playoffs on the 4th line.
Yes.
Finishes the playoffs playing top line and being an absolute force in the top 6 for the majority of the playoffs. Or second line, but he was that guy in the top 6 again. And I think Evan Rodriguez could be a really good trade chip. The wild card is definitely Mackey. Him not being offer sheet eligible definitely gives Bill Zito the ultimate leverage. I think if he gets traded, he could be useful as a trade piece to get a big name defenseman back. If you lose Aaron Ekblad, that's what the angle I could see that going in. But then on the flip side of that, everyone knows Mackey's potential is high. Mackey knows his potential is high. Mackey's agent knows his potential is high. If Evan Rodriguez gets moved and the priority becomes keeping Brad Marchand, I don't think Paul Maurice has any plans of starting the season with Marchand not on that third line with Anton Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen. That almost assures Mackey that he's going to have a top 6 role. He's going to either be playing with Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk, or he's going to be playing with Sasha Barkov and Carter Verhaeghe. If you're able to pitch that to Mackey, like, hey, you've got the inside track on a top 6 role, and you will be a line mate with one of 2 superstar players, guaranteed. If you play the way you played last season, he has to look at that as, wow, I have 2 years to absolutely maximize my value, assuming they give him a 2-year bridge contract. I think that's hard to pass up, and I think at that point, as a young player, you're not penny pinching at that point and trying to get as much as you possibly can. You're going to sign for whatever is necessary to sign for, and you're going to absolutely crush it for the next 2 years or 3 years on the bridge contract, playing with superstar players and drive your value through the roof. So that Mackey's got a choice to make in this too. But I think if it's not the trade route, he's got an absolutely incredible opportunity to be the biggest bargain in the NHL for a couple of years and then drive his value through the roof.
And that buys the Panthers time for when Mikko's contract expires, Sergei Bobrovsky's contract expires as well, so they could have that room to pay him later on down the line. And hey, even if it's 2 years, $3 million, but people are probably wondering, but hey, that's the same exact AAV as Evan Rodriguez, but the ceiling's just a lot higher as far as like goal scoring potential for that one. I know there's more roster flexibility for moving up and down, and we don't want to see Mackey on the 4th line. We'd rather see him in the top 6. So that's the pros and cons there whenever it comes to just how Mackey's useful in the lineup versus how Evan Rodriguez is useful in the lineup as well. So if Mackey does get traded for a big name defenseman, what are the possibilities that the Panthers could get out there as far as shifting the money from paying a lot of forwards to at least reallocating it to the defense? Because we all know that that's a big turn point that the Panthers need to look at going forward. So we are going to discuss that and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment number 3 here on this Wednesday, June 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And the 2025 Hockey Hall of Fame class has been announced. So the following names have been announced that they are going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, which will be in November. Zdeno Chara, Alexander McGillney, finally 16 years waiting, and he's finally in. First player to defect out of Russia, over a point per game player, and he's in. Duncan Keith, Conn Smythe winner, 2-time Norris Trophy winner. Jennifer Botterill, for Team Canada, she's won Olympic gold, World Championships. Brianna Decker, another women's hockey player for Team USA, and former Panther Jumbo Joe Thornton, he's in. And also builders Danielle Savago and Jack Parker, former BU head coach. Carey Price got snubbed, and once again, Keith Tkachuk also got snubbed. So Carey Price got snubbed in his first year of eligibility. So a little bit of a surprise there. But now 8 former Panthers have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. Ed Belfour, Pavel Bure, Dino Ciccarelli, Igor Larionov, Roberto Luongo, Joe Nieuwendyk, Mike Vernon, and now Joe Thornton. It's awesome that this era of Florida Panthers hockey, you're going to have probably minimum at least 3 Hall of Famers, maybe 4. The 3 that, in my opinion, are locks: Barkov, Tkachuk, Bobrovsky. The fourth one that's a maybe is Sam Reinhart. So great to see that 2 Stanley Cups. We are witnessing not only Florida Panthers history, but the future on possibly seeing them in the Hall in Toronto. Your quick thoughts before we go back into the defense conversation.
Yeah, I thought super exciting. I was definitely disappointed originally seeing Keith Tkachuk didn't make it in again, but I do think he will eventually. But with Joe Thornton, his time with the Panthers was short. But he was definitely a fun piece of that team that won the President's Trophy, and really, if you think about it, kicked off this era of Florida Panthers dominance in the Eastern Conference. He was mostly a fourth line player during that time, but we talk about the impact of some of the veterans who have played on the Panthers over the past 10 to 15 years, and kind of helped the current core develop and grow. And Joe Thornton definitely made his impact felt in the year that he was with the Panthers. Absolutely wish the Panthers could have gotten him a Stanley Cup. Definitely had an opportunity to do it. Fell short in the playoffs that year, but man, what a fun team that was. And Joe Thornton had some moments that year where he definitely found the fountain of youth and had some pretty incredible plays for a guy his age. And one of the last guys, maybe the last guy on the Panthers to play without a visor. And that's what I'll remember Joe Thornton for.
Yeah. Also, Matt Martin retired today. He's also another one who didn't wear a visor for the New York Islanders. Joe Thornton, former Art Ross winner, Hart Trophy winner, and saw the vision for the Panthers even before they won a playoff series.
He sure did.
So I want to thank Joe Thornton for seeing it before a lot of people did.
And arguably the best beard in franchise history. I mean, him and Radko Gudas maybe go toe to toe, but arguably the best beard in the history of the team.
No doubt. All right, so back to the conversation discussing the Panthers' leverage going into this offseason. So Aaron Ekblad, the reports are that he is going to test the open market. I did not mention this in my last episode that Aaron Ekblad during the parade did say that his agent called him and say not to say anything about not bleeping leaving when it comes to that. So another thing when it comes to the defense is the reports on what the Panthers could do with also Nate Schmidt is also the reports are it's going to be dependent on what goes on around him. So basically saying that he's not going to be a priority for the Panthers and that it's likely going to be kind of the OEL route, how he's going to get a pay bump somewhere else. So expect Nate Schmidt to be gone. But Aaron Ekblad, former number 1 overall pick from that draft in Philadelphia. You know the story with him, Reinhart, Leon Draisaitl, Sam Bennett. But at the time of his extension, it would seem as a shock around the NHL world. A year before his ELC expired, 8-year deal for a number 1 overall pick coming out of that. Worth the AAV there. Yeah, the injuries happen. But then, as I said, you're getting paid for what you are going to be worth, not for what you've done. So looks like that Aaron Ekblad is going to test the market. He's not going to get that 8th year, but there are options for the Panthers out there in the case that that Aaron Ekblad does not return. And I have 3 of them for us to finish off the show. One, there's only really one team in the Eastern Conference that's full-blown rebuilding. Everyone else is up in the air, and that's the Pittsburgh Penguins. And this defenseman, Erik Karlsson, Swedish defenseman, 2 years left on his contract. He's currently has a 10 million AAV. The other 1.5 from his 11 million is with San Jose. Can play on the power play. Doesn't really play penalty kill. I'm not sure if he's a fit on this team, but the good news is, ever since his lingering foot injury, he's played 82 games the last 3 seasons. Knock on wood, in the case the Panthers do trade for him. But here's the thing. Kyle Dubas doesn't have a lot of leverage with that contract as a guy trying to just finally move away from the Malkin, Crosby, Letang era there. Another one, Rasmus Andersson. It's been reported that it's going to be a split between Calgary and Anderson. And his current cap hit right now, fits the Panthers' present. $4.55 million. He's around the same age as Ekblad. He can play power play. He can munch minutes on the PK. Turns 29 in October, and likely you're going to have to pay him, not only trade for him, but extend him immediately as well. And that's the great thing about. But the thing is, I don't think Zito has as much leverage in this situation. Calgary, they can sit back. Craig Conroy can sit back and wait on this one. The other one, I think it's the least likely for the Panthers here. RFA, Noah Dobson. And this goes back to the Mackie Samoskevich, whether they use him as trade bait to use for a big name defenseman. The New York Islanders are not close to contending. They're getting the number 1 overall pick. They're going to pick Matthew Schaefer. Do they want Noah Dobson to be his running mate on the top line there? Assuming that he plays the top line to start. But there's so many bad contracts on Long Island for what's going on. So can they afford to pay so many guys while they're not even close to contending? They have a new general manager in Matthew Darche here for them. So what's going to be what package can the Panthers possibly put out there? But the thing is, I don't know if the Panthers would have the best one for Matthew Darche to pull the trigger there.
Yeah, so I'll start and go the opposite order that you did, and I'll start with Dobson. I think ultimately his trade price is going to be a little too high for what the Panthers can pay. They've already mortgaged a bunch of firsts. They're not. I mean, Mackey's a great trade piece, but I think ultimately the Islanders are going to want high value picks as part of that package. And Mackey, while he's a really good piece when you talk about a young player who has some high trade value and high potential, any package for Noah Dobson is going to come with the cost of picks plus prospects. Yes. Mackey checks the box of top prospect, but as far as picks go, the Panthers can't really put together a pick package that's going to entice the Islanders to give up Noah Dobson, especially at his age. And then when you consider you have to extend him, you're going to pay likely over what you were willing to give Aaron Ekblad anyway. So you're not really getting the any kind of cap relief in that sense. So I think Noah Dobson is a long shot. Rasmus Andersson, I think, is, at least as far as timeline, age, current AAV, and extension projected AAV, the perfect fit for the Panthers. As a matter of fact, he's a guy that when I'm playing NHL 25, I'm trading for every time in the 2025 offseason in my franchise. So he's a perfect fit for what the Panthers do. I think he'd be a seamless fit next to Gus Forsling as a D partner. And you allow Mikkola and Jones to stay together, kind of the twin towers on your middle pair there. Mm-hmm. And Jones played so much better in Florida than he did in Chicago, getting to play those second pair minutes as opposed to being the top pair shutdown guy that Aaron Ekblad is. I think Rasmus Andersson's two-way play is perfect for what the Panthers do. I think he's got enough physicality and nastiness to fit in there. And then the one thing when you consider Andersson and Ekblad kind of similar age, I think Rasmus Andersson's game will age better than Aaron Ekblad's will, because Andersson is such a great skater. He's a lot more mobile than Aaron Ekblad is, and I don't think Ekblad's going to get more mobile as he gets older.
Yes.
Now, obviously, I would love to have Ekblad back. If that's what you can, if you're able to do that, go ahead and re-sign him. And the number works for the team and for the player. I'd love to have Ekblad back, because at least that's him and Forsling. That's proven. That there's no guessing game. We know that works. But I think Rasmus Andersson playing with Forsling would be a match made in heaven. I think they'd be fantastic, and I think Andersson's game would age better over the years. Erik Karlsson, that's an interesting one. I would not really be a fan of it.
Yeah.
The skating ability is still there. The offense is still there. But he would have to. It's the 5-on-5 play, and he would have to play a top four right side role. I mean, there's no way you could shelter him from having to play against top lines or having to play against second lines. And I don't think he's effective defensively enough. to continue doing that at his current age. I think if he were to play that style a little bit more, you're looking at injuries again. I think part of the reason he's been so healthy the past couple of years and played all 82 is because he doesn't do a whole lot on the defensive end 5-on-5. He's not hitting guys. He's not blocking shots. He's not really taking the punishment along the end boards when he's going back to retrieve pucks. He's kind of just getting the puck and getting it out of there, which is a skill in itself. But we've seen a guy who has been all defense on the defensive end and didn't exactly age too well, even though he was a tremendous puck mover in his career. And that was Keith Yandel. I mean, Iron Man, he plays all 82. He moves the puck really well, great on the power play, but we didn't really love the last few years of Keith Yandel in Florida. And I think you run the risk of having a very, very highly paid, better skating Keith Yandel if you get Erik Karlsson. I don't think we want to take that step. So Rasmus Anderson's the guy for me if we're picking from the three.
Yep, I'm with you there. And hey, if they do decide to make the decision for Erik Karlsson, 2 years left, and it doesn't hurt the future too much, at least for that. While the other guys you'd be there long term, but obviously both Anderson and Dobson are younger. I mean, Dobson's 25, so there's a lot of runway for him. So I just think that with situationally, Rasmus Anderson here in Florida would be the absolute perfect fit. So that's what we would hope for in the case that Aaron Ekblad does walk. But the preference is for him to stay in South Florida. We hope that they make it work, but we'll see what he ultimately commands there as he is set to hit free agency, which we expect him to get on the market and try to see what other teams will offer him. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much.
Before we close out here, I'll throw in one more thing on the Rasmus Anderson topic before we jump. I think we can definitely agree that Calgary has been a relatively beneficial trade partner for the Panthers over the past couple of years. So just something to keep in mind there if talks do happen around Rasmus Anderson.
Well, different GM though. It was Brad Treliving.
Different GM for sure.
It's Craig Conroy this time for Calgary. So will he look at recent history and say no to talking to the Panthers? We'll see. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the show. Thank you. Another successful Winans Wednesday as we are close to wrapping up this week. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yep, you can follow me on X at JacobW_8. And Summer of Champions Part 2 continues. So we got the draft, we got free agency coming up. It's the second best time of year. Best time of year is winning the Stanley Cup in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And you'll be back for us to recap free agency as it's next Tuesday. So get ready. Next week is going to be a fun one. So I'll see you next week, my friend.
Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.